Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank gentlemen for putting this inquiry in place. You know, the elephant in the room is that after the pandemic was announced in 2020, flu deaths suddenly disappeared. It's almost statistically impossible for the flu to go away and everything become COVID. But the question I have, and the reason I think this inquiry is so important, is was there some sort of incentive given to hospitals to code everything as a COVID death? For every patient that came in sick with some sort of upper respiratory infection to suddenly be coded COVID-19. Economic incentives can get people to do a lot of things. So I'm curious whether the hospitals, whether the administration directed the hospitals to code everything COVID-19. And then was there other financial incentives to possibly tweak the numbers? If everything's a COVID death, then the numbers are higher. These are questions the American people have. These aren't questions that just members on this side of the aisle have. Republicans, Democrats, everyone. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we shut too many elderly Americans up and kept them from being able to see their loved ones. And that was hard on many senior adults and resulted in many fatalities just from loneliness. I think there's so many questions as to this administration's continuing response to COVID-19. Even the fact that the president said on 60 Minutes that the pandemic's over, and then suddenly the White House backs that up and says, no, it's not. I think that directly relates to funding, because they need to come back to Congress and ask you guys in the CR to continue the COVID-19 funding at unprecedented levels if you take it holistically. The president said it was over, but they backed it up. They backed that statement up and said, no, it's not. I don't know if we know if COVID-19 is over or not. But I do think that the American people and their elected representatives here in the United States Congress deserve answers, and we have the right to see the documents and to get a clearer picture and understanding on how the funding sources were directed, whether there were incentives put in place, whether the numbers were skewed, especially when it comes to funding at a time when we're $30 trillion in debt, 31. American people deserve that. We deserve it. We're asking for it. And I hope we expect it as elected officials representing 770,000 people. With that, I'll be glad to yield.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir. I'll yield to Mr. Bouchon.
Yeah, I just want to say on the data situation, and this isn't necessarily particularly directed at the administration, but the reality is we did put in place, Congress did, a financial incentive on COVID-19 diagnoses at hospitals because they were overwhelmed, and then that has continued, and so there was a financial incentive to use hospital coding to obtain more payment. That is not my opinion. There's solid data out of New York State, in fact, that shows that in many cases, hospital deaths that were recorded by COVID, in fact, these were people that died with COVID, not of COVID, but because of the coding situation were recorded as a COVID death. And so I do think in medicine, it's critical to have actual solid data that is factual and correct. And the information out of New York shows us that the number of COVID deaths being reported around the country are overinflated because people are dying with COVID of heart attacks and other things.
But not of COVID. I reclaim my
not
time. I
of
appreciate the gentleman
COVID.
bringing that point up. At the same time, CMS goes into assisted living facilities, and if they don't have their I's dotted properly and their T's crossed, they withhold Medicare funding from the assisted living facilities. It's amazing how CMS treats one source of funding and tries to find a way not to pay the assisted living facilities, but yet on the other hand, all this money is available. If you code something a certain way, you get it. That's asinine, folks. And we need to see the documents so we can make better decisions. With that, I yield back.